Hey fantasy fans, this is Dan here with TreeBeard Book Reviews, and today I'm reviewing the techno-thriller, The Andromeda Strain by Michael Crichton. Let's get into it. Alright guys, so before we get into the review, I just want to say thank you so much for continuing to support my channel, and if you like the videos I'm producing, please feel to like, comment, and subscribe. As I've mentioned before, I have a Discord channel now, so that's going to be in the link below. So feel free to hit me up on the Discord, and we can chat about books and the books I'm reading and things you want to see in the future. So let's talk the Andromeda Strain. So first off, I'm actually going to do kind of a spoiler-filled review of this one. It's a 1969 novel. It's like 52 years old now, so I think we can kind of get into spoilers and talk about it. And I think I really want to talk about it. So I'm going to go through the plot, what I liked, what I didn't like, and yeah. So let's get into it. All right. So the Andromeda Strain. So the Andromeda Strain, as I mentioned, it's known as a techno thriller, and Michael Crichton really invented the techno thriller. It's like that mix of science and fiction and like sci-fi fantasy. So it was a really interesting book. This is the first time I've ever read this book. I have a large Michael Crichton collection. I've read a lot of his later stuff, but I haven't read the Andromeda Strain before. So that's kind of why I want to talk about it. So as I said, this book came out in 1969, and what this book is really about is that the United States military is sending out probes into the outer atmosphere and to collect like microorganisms and look for life out in the universe. And one of these probes crash lands in Piedmont, Arizona, and a team was sent out to collect the return satellite, and they find the whole city, everyone in the city dead. The city of 50 people, or a town, I guess a little small town, everyone is dead. And except for two people, there's an older gentleman and a newborn baby, or a few-month-old baby, was the only survivors of this this crash. So the then what happens is the government has a team set up called the Wildfire Team, and this team consisted of like Jeremy Stone, Mark Hall was one of the other characters, like Charles Burton, I believe, Peter Levitt, and so they were all like kind of experts in their field. So like I believe Jeremy Stone was a bacteriologist, Levitt was a microbiologist, Burton was a pathologist, and Mark Hall was a surgeon. So they kind of assembled this crack team, which they had already kind of put in place. So Jeremy Stone was like this leader on bacteriology, and he worked for Stanford University, and he'd set up this Wildfire Institute to in case like Earth ever came in contact with an alien like virus or bacteria, which could potentially be hazardous to humans. So this death event that happened in Piedmont, sparked the Wildfire Institute to come into play, where their team collected the satellite, collected the two survivors, and they're investigating how to just figure out what this bacteria is, and how they can treat it and how they can keep it from spreading. So it's actually kind of fitting, because it's really like kind of like what we're living in today with COVID and stuff like that. But it's obviously a little bit more extreme, a little bit more fictionalized. But one thing I want to say for a novel that was written in 1969, Michael Crichton had some really cool ideas and some stuff that we don't even do today. And like he was thinking so far ahead of his time that it's quite unbelievable, and I'll talk about that in the good. So essentially, this team has collected the satellite, they've collected the two survivors, and they go to this Wildfire Institute. I believe it's set up in Arizona, kind of like Area 51 almost, where it's this 5-layer underground facility where it's actually it's nuclearized. So if there's ever a breach, a nuke will go off and detonate the whole area, killing anyone inside, but it would stop, obviously, the spread of this disease. So these 4 scientists, along with all the other members of this Wildfire team, are investigating this Andromeda strain. That's what they call it, where they're testing it on rats, and then they figured out that this bacteria, it ended up being a bacterium that like coagulated all the blood in everyone's body, like in the body of these victims, like instantly almost. So it would like you know, they would die almost instantly because they would get like a blood clot in their brain, and the rest of their blood would just solidify like just like cake, and they would die. And so they were studying this, you know, through all these different layers, like through testing on animals and like, you know, doing like necropsies on like dead animals and see how it affected them. And so eventually the team figures out how it spreads and how it doesn't spread. And it turns out, so the two survivors, the baby who, and this is the really interesting part, was that there was this baby and this like 70-year-old geriatric man who survived, and they don't know how are these two related, what caused them to survive. And that was what was really interesting, is that the baby, because the baby was screaming and crying, it made itself basic in a sense that you basic. No, so what happened was with the crying, I guess it does something to your body, and it makes your body basic. It removes the acidity from your blood. And whereas this older gentleman, he had a stomach ulcer, so he was like taking sterno, and like he was literally making himself acidic. So since the baby was basic and like he was acidic, there was a range of acidity and base that this virus or this bacteria could exist in. And if you're too basic, it won't grow, and if you're too acidic, it won't grow, and it doesn't spread, and you eventually survived. So because they found cases where some people died a lot slower to it because they either had like their blood was a little bit more acidic but not enough to stop the spread, and they ended up going crazy and like committing suicide, but because their brains and their body was all starting to like coagulate all their blood. So eventually what happens in the end is that there's a breach in one of the labs, and the nuke is about to go off. They have a 3-minute timer for the nuke to go off, and you know, they're worried all about this disease spreading. They're all going to catch it and die. And then but then they realize that the nuclear warhead would be a perfect breeding ground for this Andromeda strain, and would cause it to mutate even further. And so they have to stop the nuke. So eventually Mark Hall stops the nuke from going off, and they eventually find out the Andromeda strain had mutated further to a non-dangerous state. So that's essentially the whole spoiler like plot. There's a lot of stuff I've kind of glazed over. It's actually quite a short book, so it's not too bad. So things I'm going to get into things I liked and the things I didn't like about the Andromeda strain. Okay, so getting into some of the good things I liked about the Andromeda strain. The one thing I will say, you know, the plot did have me gripped quite early on, like this mystery of how, like, what happened to all these people, what's this sickness and how it killed them, because you don't know. You have no idea how they started dying and started, like, what killed them and how quickly they died. They literally died within, like, seconds if their body wasn't too basic or acidic. And so that was really cool, kind of, you know, you're with the scientists trying to figure out, like, how does this thing spread? How does it kill? How dangerous is it? You know, should we all be worried? Is this like a pandemic level kind of bacterium? So that was like really kind of cool. Like this whole mystery of, you know, like how do we solve it? How do we cure it? How does it spread? Like how do we stop the spread? Kind of like what we're dealing with nowadays. So that was really cool. And like, you know, you're meeting. The one thing I do want to talk about, like with Michael Crichton, is he's a really good. He is so good at explaining science to a layman's, where when you're reading it, you feel smart because you understand it. So it's just like he just taught it well. He just explained it really well. And there was one thing that I want to talk about too that was really cool that I really liked was the odd man hypothesis. So what that is there was one member of the team, Mark Hall. He's a surgeon, so he was kind of like, you know, different from the other ones. Like, you know, one's a pathologist, one's a bacteriologist, one's a microbiologist. So why is like this surgeon here? So the big reason is because he was the odd man. So he fulfilled the odd man hypothesis. So what the odd man hypothesis says, that single men in crisis situations are more likely to make the correct decision in a state of crisis than someone who is married who has let's say, something to lose. So in this case, in the Wildfire Institute, they're in these 5 different levels of like the secure institute where there's a nuke. Like there's a nuke like that's gonna blow up if this disease ever spreads or gets out. And there was like a poignant moment where like Mark's like, well, I'm not just gonna go commit suicide, and he's like, no, 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 you don't understand. If this gets out, the bomb's gonna go off. You have 3 minutes to disarm it, not just to blow us up. Like it's gonna go. So that was really cool. Really added some tension. So this odd man hypothesis, theorized that he's single. He's gonna make the right choice, and where as people who have married or kids are compromised in the sense that they don't want to. They want to see their kids or family again and something like that. So they had the odd man hypothesis pretty much states that this person has less to lose and would make the right decision for the greater good. So that was kind of cool. Okay, so one thing I want to talk about that was really cool was the technology in the Andromeda strain. So, in 1969, there's no way they had some of the technology Crichton was talking about. Just from the microscopes to the levels of sanitation and security, like the microsurgery tools, and even like the clean rooms, and it was so cool how he described all these certain like medical techniques in these medical rooms that were blew me away even today, thinking about like we don't even have some of this stuff today, and like there was like Skype calling almost, and I know they didn't have that in 1969. So there was some really kind of cool stuff. And as I mentioned with the Wildfire Institute, it was 5 layers. And so all the scientists had to move through different layers where they would be like decontaminated in a sense. So they had to spend 2 hours at layer 1 and then 5 hours at layer 2. And, they go through all sorts of like cleanses and like removing layers of skin to making sure you're not passing on any kind of pathogens. And just even like some of the stuff, they had like this automated system where they sit down and like take your blood pressure, take everything, all your vitals, and ask you these questions. And to think about that in like 1969 was like super cool. Like he did a really cool job with the science, and as I said, he explained it really well. So yeah, that's really like some of the good things I liked. I liked the plot was good. The science was really cool. Like the idea of the odd man hypothesis was really good. And like this mystery of this, what this disease is. And yeah, those are some of the things I really liked about the book. So why don't we talk about now the things I didn't like about the Andromeda strain? Okay, so let's get into some of the things I didn't like about the Andromeda strain. Oh man, there's actually a lot more bad than good in this book. To be frank. It's a short book, so it's like this is a compilation of 3 where it's the Andromeda strain, the Terminal Man, and the Great Train Robbery. But man, this book. First, I'm gonna get to the ending because the ending sucked. The ending was like so anticlimactic that it ruined the whole book for me. So you have this build up, this tension that's going like it's kind of like. You're building this promise, and this is what Crichton kind of did. He built this promise, and it's like the Chekhov's gun kind of thing, like where, like Jeremy Stone's telling like Mark Hall that there's a bomb, like there's a nuke that's gonna go off. So it's like this nuke's gonna either detonate or it's gonna that 3-minute timer is gonna go off, right? And so they eventually find out that this Andromeda strain mutated to like a less deadly like version of itself, and it was just so freaking anticlimactic. Where it's like this build up, this deadly disease, it breaks out, and it's just like, it just like whimpers out, and it was just so like, it was so disappointing. The ending, it was just like, oh my god, like what? And that's the thing. Like Michael Crichton does really like abrupt endings. Like it's like, whoop, end. You need to put together the rest of the story, and this one was just so weak. Like the ending really, like I'm used to Crichton endings, and this one I was like, I really don't like this. It really brought it down. Like this tension, and just drop. It's like, that sucked. That was really let me down. So yeah, like the ending wasn't great. I will say, did not enjoy that anticlimactic ending. And then just kind of get onto the character. So the character, like, a lot of his character work gets better later on. Like probably I would say around like Eaters of the Dead or like the 13th Warrior. But the characters in this one were so one dimensional. Like they just didn't feel like real people. Especially like Jeremy Levitt, who was the microbiologist, where he had like epilepsy. And this is one of the things that didn't like feel real in a sense that, they've run all these tests on these scientists, like making sure they're healthy and that they can perform at the highest level. And one of them like just gets by that he has epilepsy and they just never caught it, and it was just like, and the characters like just again were not wooden, but they just were really one dimensional, and they just didn't feel like real people in a sense. Like especially like they're all PhDs, and Michael Crichton was a PhD, I believe, or an MD, and so he was a smart man, and like he knew the science. Like he had the science. Like you're reading and you're like, I believe this 100%. But yeah, the characters just like I didn't care about any of the characters. Like they're not really super interesting. They just don't have really strong personalities for me. So yeah, it was actually like a bit of a letdown, this book, in the end, where it started really interesting and like you want to figure out what the heck is happening in this city, and it just ended up being like a whimper out. It was just kind of really weak. So in the end, like I'm actually going to give this book. So get to my rating. I'm going to give this book a 2.4 out of 5. It did nothing for me in the end. I don't think I'm going to ever go back and reread it. I do have the Andromeda Evolution. So that was a book that was put out posthumously after he passed away. I think he just recently came out, and it was like it's co-written, so it's obviously using notes that Michael Crichton left behind. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not going to read this one again. I'm glad I read it just to say, I love Michael Crichton. It doesn't really change my opinion of his writing. But this one just, it wasn't his best. It was his first book published under his name. So, yeah, I gave it a shot. Wasn't for me. And, I'm probably going to stop my Michael Crichton reread right now. Just because I have so many things on the go. Like I have my Wheel of Time reread starting up right now. So I really want to get into that, and I don't want to know if I add another reread or another read of an author, because I do, like I said, I want to read The Dark Tower next year. I do want to start The Expanse, and I want to start Malazan at some point too. So there's so many books I want to read. So I think Michael Crichton, I'm going to put him to the side for now. But again, the Andromeda Strain, I'm more than happy to discuss with you guys below. Let me know what you liked about the book, what you didn't like about the book. And tell me maybe what your favorite Michael Crichton book is. I mean, it's obvious it's Jurassic Park. But, I actually really like The Lost World too. So we'll leave it there. But I said, guys, feel free to hit me up on the Discord and leave some comments below. And we'll see you guys next time. Thank you.